Alrighty guys, this is your host ID Jester. Welcome. So we're going to introduce you to the coin system, kind of go over some of the information about the coin system and kind of cover over the details on how the coin system operates and what it does, and kind of give you guys an introduction to the coin system as best we can here so that you may be able to learn a little bit of stuff and may be able to find out whether or not this is something you might enjoy and try out. So we're going to have a few different looks at some of the coin games in here. So if you're new to coin and you're not sure exactly what it is, coin stands for counterinsurgency. So the CO is counter and the IN is insurgency. So it's counterinsurgency, and basically the system, what it's doing is it's simulating various forces that are trying to not only militarily but economically and politically take over a certain region. And so in most of the coin games you'll have up to 4 different factions fighting over different resources and different territories, either through economic means, through military means, or through some subversion to try and take over and accomplish their different objectives. Now what we have here on our map here, or on our board, is Cuba Libre, and this is technically the easiest game of the system to kind of understand things, because there's not a lot of territories on the map. You can see it's about 10 territories. There's not a million different pieces scattered throughout. There's just a few pieces, so it's kind of a little bit more manageable than some of the other coin games. For example, if we were to go into Fire in the Lake and load up that game, you can see we have quite a difference here. Many more different territories, many more different pieces on the map, and many different rules and understandings of what you have to do. So there is a coin game system for those of you who want something a little easier to get into, and there's also if you're into more of a deeper, more rich game, then obviously there is that system as well for you out there. So there's many different varieties, many different errors. In fact, if we actually go back into our there's a Falling Sky, which is Caesar's conquest of Gaul, and you can see this one is a little bit more involved with a few more areas and a few more pieces and some different rules associated with it. We can also look at, say, a Distant Plain here and load this one up. If I hit the load, there we go, and we'll just go short scenario, that's fine. And this module here inside of Tabletop Simulator is very, very good, because it actually, as you saw in the beginning there, actually has the different setups. You just click on which setup you want, and it'll automatically set up the cards for you to play and all the pieces. So this one I would say is kind of in the middle territory between easy and hard in the series. It does have a few more areas, but not that many more pieces. It's not too restricted on how many special rules there are, and so it's kind of a middle tier one. And so there's all kinds of different levels of complexity that you can get into in the coin games. So let's kind of cover what we are going to talk about, and we'll probably be using Cuba Libre for most of this tutorial, just because, like I said, It's a little bit easier to see and understand when there's not a million things staring you in the face. So this is a typical coin game in that there are 4 different factions all vying for victory here. You have the blue faction, which is the government forces. And so they have various pieces. You have the Syndicate, which is the green pieces. You have the yellow faction, which is the Dictario forces. And then you have the red forces, which are the 26th of July forces. Basically, this is Castro's insurgency. So we have 4 different factions. And with all coin games, or I should say most of the coin games, each of the different factions play completely differently, which is another fun fact for the coin system, in that each of the factions has their own set of objectives, their own way to win, and their own way of doing things. Some are more military, some are more economic, some just care about holding as much territory, while other factions out there want more support. And we'll talk about those terms here in a few minutes. So, what's the best way to do this, I guess? So let's go over the pieces really fastly. In most of the coin games, now this won't go for all of them, there is multitudes of different eras covered in this system. There's modern day, there is early 2000s with a distant plane. There's the 1960s here, which is covered by Cuba Libre, or actually this is 1957 and 1958. I was just rounding. You have some Caesar and Gaul. You have the Liberty or Death, which is the American Revolution. So there's tons and tons of different games. They keep coming out with games for the system. They keep expanding on it. They keep adding to it. So once you learn the basics, the cool thing is you can probably pick up another game in the series and, skim through the rule book and read up on some of the new rules and be able to play that pretty easily once you understand the main concept. So, cubes. So you can see there's different kinds of pieces here. Let's just look at Havana here. So we have different kinds of pieces. So in most of the coin games, these tall cylinder cubes are usually like your guerrillas or your underground forces or your rebellion forces, stuff like that. And they usually have 2 sides. Again, I'm talking in general terms because not every game has got exactly this, but in general terms, okay? So if the game system you pick up might be slightly different, just keep that in mind. But in general terms, cylinder cubes here are usually your guerrillas or your underground forces. Like if you're playing Liberty or Death, this would be like the Patriots. And then they usually have 2 sides. And one side has no symbol on it. And if we flip this over, you will see that it does have a symbol on it. So these usually represent 2 different things. This one over here on the right, which doesn't have the symbol, means it's inactive. And the one on the left-hand side with the symbol on it means it's active. And in each different system, that usually means some different variation on what this piece can do or can't do. A lot of times you'll go to execute a command and it'll be flip over 1 inactive unit. So in that case, you could flip over this unit, make it active to accomplish whatever your objective is. So that's what these cylinder pieces are. You can see, doesn't matter the color of them, they usually represent about the same thing. The cubes, on the other end, are usually different. The cubes usually represent your military forces or your police. And in this case, the government forces actually have the blue units, which are your troops, and then the green units, which are your police. And they usually do different things, but they are cubes as opposed to these underground guerrilla type units. And it's easier to distinguish between them on the map this way. There usually, for each of the different factions, are these little round discs. And these usually represent different bases that the faction can put out. And usually the reason for using those bases is to be able to take over territories and be able to recruit your units where there's bases, etc., etc. Let's see, is there any other forces we need to talk about at this time? No, I don't think so. So another very important aspect to the coin system, and most games, again, not all games, but most games usually have some kind of control and support. So control is going to be whoever has the most units in that area. So you can see here in Havana, there is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of the government forces. There is, let's go ahead and flip these units back over. There's 2 of the dictatorial forces, and then there's 1 of the green forces. I'll keep wanting to call them the Syndicate. They are the Syndicate. Yes, that's right. Okay. And so whoever has the most amount of pieces in there will have control of that area. So in this case, the government has control. We can also flip this over, and you can see that maybe the Syndicate has control, or the Dictatoros has control, or the July 26 faction might have control. So whoever has the most pieces will usually have control of it. So you can see in La Habana, there's 1 piece for green, there's 1 piece for red. So you can see this is an uncontrolled area because nobody has the most amount of pieces in there. Now, and that would happen throughout the different territories. Each area in the coin game, usually the map is broken up into many different areas, and each of those areas usually has who has controlled it. In this case, you can see there's no pieces for anybody, so it's uncontrolled. You can have 100 pieces from one unit and 100 pieces from a different faction, and it would still be uncontrolled, even though there's 200 units in this space. A space is usually has some kind of border around it, and it has some kind of terrain feature on here, which you usually can find the information about that on the actual map. So yeah, you can see here, the brown is mountains, the light green is grasslands, and the dark green is forest. That's kind of important because some of the cards might say something like add 3 units to a forest region. So you can't just put it here or in the mountains or something. And sometimes when units battle or fight in areas, some units are better than others, and based upon your different factions out there. So, so that's what the terrain is, and you can see in this example here, this whole territory is the mountains, and this would be a grassland. There's also usually a number on here, and that represents the population in that area. And roughly, most of the coin games represent this as a number of like 1 million people. So Mantaza, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Mantaza has about 1 million people. So it's worth basically 1 point worth of value. Las Vegas is 2 population, so it's got about 2 million people. Havana is where it's 6, because it's got like 6 million people, etc., etc. All right, so we have control. Control is gained by having more pieces there than your opponents. Sometimes, like for example, in a distant plane, the government forces and the coalition forces, if they outnumber the Taliban or the warlords combined, then they own the territory. So each game might be slightly different. This game, I think it's each individual faction is counted for itself, which is another reason why this is one of the easier ones to get into. So that's what the different areas are, and that is what control does. Now support is how the hearts and minds of the people living there feel towards the different factions. And usually there is a active support. They're supporting the active government, in this case the government forces, and they feel good about them, or they're opposing them. And there's some games there are just one level of active support or active opposition, and then in other games of the series there's up to 2 values. So you can see here, if we flip this over, passive support means they like the government, they're pretty good, they're pretty decent, they like them, they are, really, they're kind of behind them. They think they're doing an okay job, right? You flip this over to active support times 2. They really love the government now. They're behind them. They're supporting them. They think they're doing a great job, and they're, really thinking the government is really good at this point. If we look at Mantaza, right, this has got active opposition, where the hearts and minds of these people kind of are like, no, we really don't believe in the government, and we're kind of against them, and we're kind of going for the opposition to the government, which in this case happens to be Castro and his faction, the red faction. And so you can see it's kind of red in this case. And so they don't feel really happy about it. And of course, if we flip this over, it's going to be there. It's going to be active opposition times 2, which means they really hate the government and they really are supporting the opposition. So there's basically 5 levels of control that you can have. You can have neutral. You can have passive opposition times 1, passive opposition times 2. You can have active support times 2 and active support times 1. So there's 5 different levels in this game. Again, not every game will have that much. Some games are just neutral, opposed, and support. And so each game is slightly different in how they do that. And this is usually very important to some of the factions and getting the people to believe in them, and other factions that don't really care what the people think. And we'll go over that here in just a second. But you can see Mantaza is a good example in that it doesn't matter how many units are in there. You can have, say 3 units in there, and it could still be active opposition. So these are 2 distinctively different and opposing things. You do not need to have you can actually have many units in this box that are for the government, and it still can be opposing the government. So these are 2 different things. Here's actually a good example here in that La Habana. You can see it has passive support towards the government. There's no government forces in here. In fact, there is a July 26th, one of Castro's units in here. And there's also a Syndicate force in here as well. So doesn't matter how many units you have in there at all for support. The only thing that the units do is tell you who has control of that area. So in all coin games, one of the most important things is understanding how each of the different factions win, what do they care about? What do they not care about? So let's look at, for example, on this card down in the bottom right hand corner, and in most of the cards you'll see victory conditions. So you can see down in the bottom, victory, government, all cities are at active support and total support exceeds 18. So what does that mean and how do we do that? So all cities at active support and total support exceeds 18. Well, cities are usually your big round objects that are usually located on your map. Sometimes you'll have many cities. Sometimes you'll have just one city, like a distant plane just has one city in it. And other games, like this one, there will be multiple cities in there. So for the government to win, they need to have support for all 3 of the cities. And they have to have total support on the board of 18 or more. And we'll explain how to get that. So you can see in Camagüey, they have passive support, but they don't have any support over here in Santa de Cuba. There's no support there at all. So the government cannot win until they get support in this hex, or in this area. And then for Havana, they actually have active support times 2. So if they were able to get active support in all the cities and have a total of 18 or higher, they would win. So how do you know how much each area is worth? Well, this is where the active support and the passive support and passive opposition and active opposition come in. And what they will do is they will multiply the value times the city or area's population. So you can see Havana is worth 6. And if you get active support, you get times 2, so that is actually worth 12 victory points for the government. And if we go and look at Camagüey, it is worth 1, and they're multiplying that by 1, so that is worth 1 point. And last but not least, if they had support here, if they had passive support, it'd be times 1. If they had the other one, flip it over. There we go. Active support. Couldn't think of the name of it. If they had active support, that would be worth 2 points. So that's how they get up to 18. What the government wants to do is they want to get all the cities to believe in them and get 18 points total on the map. So you can see up here in Las Vegas, they have government control. It's worth 2 points, but they don't have any support there. So they need to try to get support in this area because it's worth two victory points. And of course, if they get active support, they're going to multiply that by 2. It would be worth 4 points. So if they got 12 points from the city, and they got 4 points from Las Vegas, that's 16. And they got 2 points here in Camagüey, and they got 2 points here. That would be 18. And they would have all the cities under support, and they would have a total of 18, and they would win. So that's how the government wins, is by getting all the cities under their support, whether times 1 or times 2, and then getting a total of 18 throughout everywhere. All right, so that is the government. Let's look at the 26th of July. They're basically the exact opposite of the government, and this is true for most coin games. There's usually one side trying to do, let's say, good side and the bad side, or the good side and the evil side, however you want to look at it. There's usually one side trying to get the hearts and minds of the people, and there's the other side that are trying to get the hearts and the minds of the people to follow them. Not all games, but most of them. So in this case, you can see down the bottom right-hand corner, 26th of July, they want to get total opposition plus bases to exceed 15. So what does that mean? Well, same thing. They want to get opposition markers in the areas and get their total plus the number of bases. So they have 4 bases, and they want to get that total to, what was it, 12? 15. So you can see currently, if we just scan the map, you can see there's 1 point here. Mantaza, 1 times 1 is 1 point. They have 2 times 1, so this is 2 points. So they have 2 plus 1 is 3. They have Kamagui, 1 times 1 is 1. They have Orient, 1 times 2 is 2. So they have a total opposition of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they have 1 base out. So they start with, as you can see, right here, 7 points. So they want to obviously get that all the way up to 16, or they have to get higher than 15. So you can see, and usually the coins maps are really good, and they'll kind of highlight kind of like victory conditions. And you can see that once the red opposition and bases get up past 16, then they have a possibility of winning. Right now they start at 7. And you can see the same thing for the total support for the government. Starts at 16. They only need to get higher than 18. So they need 19 or more. So if they can get a couple more areas. But again, they have more requirements because they have to get the cities plus 18. All right, so that's those 2 factions, which are kind of the easy ones. There's usually, like I said, there's usually one faction that's like, I need to get the support, and there's usually another faction that's like, oh, we're opposing you, we want the people to follow us. And there's usually 2 other ones that do something a little bit different. In this case, the Directio, they want to get control population plus their bases to exceed 9. So again, controlled population. So they don't really, again, care about the support. They don't care about the support. What they want is they want all their units on, and they want to take over the areas. They want to have the people, they want to have the most territory conquered by them. They don't care who the people believe in. They believe in, if we take over as many areas with our forces, the people will just follow us. And so that's what they're doing. So they currently start at 5 points because they have DR controlled here for a point. And see. Control population plus bases exceeds 9. So their control population is going to be... Now maybe they just start with more... Oh, I'm looking at their resources, not their actual winning token. So yeah, you can see it's at 1. They need to get it up to 9. So that's what they do. They want the red guys and the blue guys to fight over the support while they're busy putting all their units on the board and kind of taking over a whole bunch of territories and getting the people, instead of government control, they want it to be dictatorial controlled. All right, and so let's see what the last faction is going to be, the Syndicate. Syndicate has more than 7 casinos open and more than 30 resources. So for the Syndicate, which is a little different, their bases are casinos. So they have 3 of them on the map right now. So what they want to do is they want to get 7 of them. 7 casinos open and more than 30 resources. So they want to get their casinos out on the board and they want to open them. This is a closed casino without the symbol on it. They want to be able to open lots of casinos all over the map and then have 30 or more resources. So if we look at 31, you can see once they reach 31 resources or more, they have all 7 or more of the casinos open, they have a chance to win. So you can see very different objectives for each of the different factions. The blue and the red are kind of opposite of one another. The DR, Dictorio, is basically just trying to expand out, get a whole bunch of different territories. And the green guys are like, I don't care what you all do. I just want to place my casinos down everywhere and get lots of money for that. So that's what the different factions do. That's how the little values of the different regions, what they represent, and what the different spaces represent. Support, really important for the government, really important for July 26 forces, but Dictorio and the Syndicate, they won't even have a counter for support because they don't care and they don't need it. There is a few special areas in this map. Not all of the games. In fact, I think this is the only one that I've seen actually has these little areas. There probably is a couple more that use these areas, but sometimes you'll have these other areas that these are the economic regions, and the economic regions will add resources to the government. So all the other players don't want the government to get those resources. They can kind of go in and take them over for themselves. And then, of course, the government's going to try and come in and kick them out of there because they do want the resources. So these are more areas that you can fight over. But these are resource areas that the government needs to get its resources. Okay, so that is quite a bit we've covered so far. And we've gone about 30 minutes or so. So what I think I'll do is just put a cut in this one. We'll come back and we'll talk about really the heart and soul of the coin system, and that is the cards and the events and the sequence of play as well. So now we covered kind of what's on the map, what the different little pieces represent, what they do. We talked about winning conditions and how the different forces, what they think about when they're trying to do their objectives, and kind of give you a gist of how different factions operate. Again, they're just each of the factions are trying to do their own thing, their own way, and they'll have different ways of doing that. And so each of the factions play really, really differently. So now we'll actually look at like I said, kind of the heart and soul of coin systems, which is the card play and the what I call the sequence of play matrix here, and understanding what you can or cannot do with these, which kind of go along with the cards and their different operations and special activities. So come on back for that episode if you're interested, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching, guys.